Okay, so let's talk about investors a little bit.
We didn't frame our round of fundraising the way we could have because Will and I were so focused on just building.
We fell into this common trap, I think, that seed stage founders fall into, where in YC you say, don't talk to anybody because just build, and then it'll figure itself out magically because demo day. Well, when's our next demo day? There is none.
What I've now since realized is actually so important when you're going from the seed to Series A. The later stage you get toward, the more the relationships matter. Yeah. So in between your seed and Series A, I've realized you actually want to be having touch points with investors and getting to know them genuinely as human beings and people.
Okay, so let's go through this timeline a little bit. You have these conversations going. You decide it's time to raise. How did you take the investors that you had circling and structure them into that parallel process?
I think we spoke to probably 10 investors, 10, 15 investors over the course of 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at the end of the first week, we had interest from multiple Series A investors on doing a round, which was super exciting. And at that point, we went into these conversations without having prepared materials. It was very much, here's a potential intro you have in your network where we both get to know you and we can ask, is this something you can help us with? They turned into, okay, we want you to come in and pitch to our partnership team next week.
Right.
So Will and I spent a really frantic weekend putting together the story of the company into slides and having it ready. It was like day of, right, was the final cut because we just didn't have it ready before. And this isn't something I advise necessarily, but it's what ended up happening.
You got to do what you got to do, you know? I also want to say that we could have talked to more than 10 to 15. And Eric, I think it was a conscious decision on our part not to do much more than that because there needs to be space to be able to recollect, take feedback, think about, hey, how did that land? As opposed to, let me rehearse this and then do it 10 times and then hopefully we get one of them. It was a constant iterative process.
Yeah. It's a mental battle. I think more than anything, you're going to people, many of whom aren't going to think it's a good idea. And success is dependent on you continuing to believe and express why you think you're going to be $1 billion company, even when you're getting people saying no.
You want to pitch as many people as possible to create this auction dynamic. But that doesn't necessarily mean pitch literally as many as you can fit into a day every day. You don't want to have back-to-back 20-minute meetings pitching people. You have to know who you are, right? You have to know how many funds you could pitch in a given day and still be on top of your game. You have to know how long it takes you to process the feedback you're getting. And you have to gauge the relative interest of the inbound and the people you're pitching, because sometimes you do need to pitch 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 investors to get to a term sheet. I've worked with founders through processes like that. And sometimes you can pitch 3 because you know that they're all ready to go and all it's going to take is a feather to tip them over or the go-ahead. And like you said, if you are doing this right, you've prepared your materials ahead of time. You're not preparing it day of or frantically asking anyone to review your materials. You should be prepared because you actually control the timing. Everything you just told us is that you were in control of the timing, not the investors. So be prepared. That's a good idea.
I actually think, Aaron, one point you said I really want to emphasize more because it's something, having learned from you, I've now explained to other founder friends how to qualify interest, right? Like a no is actually not the worst thing you could have. A no clear answer is the worst thing you could have because then you're like, should I be following up? Should I not be following up? What's going on? And so making asks is helpful, not only from this could genuinely help my company get an introduction to this potential hire, but also because if they're not interested, they won't do it.
Right.
And then you know instantly. It doesn't matter what was said or expressed in the meeting, but if you send an email with a genuine follow-up ask and they don't reply, then you know they're not interested.
It's so true. There's nothing more painful than chasing an investor who pretended to be interested in a meeting or who was interested in the meeting and then wasn't at all and just crickets. So, all right, you pitched 15. And of those, how many gave you verbal terms?
3 or 4. And ultimately got term sheets from 1 or 2.
Okay.
2. Yeah, 2.
What happened there?
Yeah, so part of it was we actually got our ultimate term sheet that we liked very early on.
Okay.
Like it was an amazing process. That's a huge reason why I wanted to go with them as investors. We had our partner meeting, and like the next day they actually said, hey, we want to do it. And we said, hey, can you send over a term sheet? And they said, yeah, there's no games being played. There's like, absolute, here's the term sheet. And so going into all these other meetings, we actually had a term sheet in hand, which is incredibly valuable, right? And we knew we liked this investor, right? And we're like, well, we should do our work and continue chatting with others. And so we very much forced it where it was kind of like we have a term sheet. Like you're in or you're out. Right? Where, to your point, Aaron, I think it was potentially if we genuinely had cared more about running a true auction process, we wouldn't have forced that so early, because investors have a really hard job too. They're like trying to figure out, do I think this is a good company?
Right.
And shortening the time frame will also lead to no's faster, because they're just like, I just can't do this, right?
Yeah.
And so we basically had a term sheet, and in the time frame we gave, which is basically you have like X days, we got one more, right? And a couple more were like in the offer stage, still talking it over phone, but refusing to actually put it down in paper, which sometimes happens. And we're just like, actually, both of these term sheets we feel really good about. We both think they're excellent investors. And ultimately, we're going to go with this one.
Mm-hmm. Why? Was it the highest price? Was it I don't know. What was the thing there that decided it?
I distinctly remember this. Yeah, it was a people piece. And Eric and I spent we pulled an all-nighter just going back and forth over, hey, who is that right board member? And what made that decision especially like just agonizing was that we had not put in the legwork of the 3 months prior to this raise, being like, hey, let's build these relationships and understand who these people are. And instead, it was like, thanks to these investors being awesome and being super quick on their process, trying to make a decision after a couple of weeks of conversations was just agonizing. And then at the very end, it was like, we found the guy that we felt, hey, we are the most comfortable with. It was Andy Weissman, Sport Ventures.
The right person for the right stage.